okay, so you either have the universe is past eternal or it's not. Is your answer just, I don't know?
Correct.
How could it possibly be that the universe could be infinite into the past?
I don't know. How could it possibly be that God is infinite in the past?
Well, we believe God is timeless.
It doesn't matter what you believe, it matters what you can
Well, no,
demonstrate.
definitionally, you asked how is it that God could be infinite in the past. I'm saying definitionally,
Well,
the Christian
defining
God
something
is
doesn't make
timeless.
it so.
Well, I know, but you asked me how could God exist infinitely
And
in
you
the
did
past.
not explain how God could exist. You just asserted that he does by definition.
You asked me definitionally something about the Christian God, and I gave you an answer. We believe he exists timelessly.
So
he doesn't exist infinitely, so I don't have that problem.
well, actually, you didn't give that answer till just now, but we're okay there. Go ahead.
God is the best explanation for the beginning of the universe. Here I'd like to present a case that begins with the Kalam cosmological argument. Now, for those who are familiar with these discussions, you might say, come on, Braxton, you're not going to bring the old Kalam argument, are you again? You're darn right. I've got a personal philosophy for my life. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it ain't broke, folks. The argument may be stated like this. Everything that begins to exist must have a cause for its existence. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe must have a cause for its existence. If the universe had no beginning, it has existed infinitely. And without even a beginning to start from, we could never have arrived at this particular moment that we're experiencing today. Because if it exists infinitely in the past, and you crossed half of infinity, you still have infinity to go, and we would have never arrived at this moment. Now, since things can't cause themselves to come into existence, and since time, space, and matter are the natural universe, and it makes no sense to say that nature came before nature to cause nature, then whatever the cause of the physical universe is must be a spaceless, timeless, and non-material cause. It also had to be able, from a timeless state, to bring the universe into existence from nothing. A mind without a body, a mind independent of a body, would serve as a fitting explanation and would also explain how the universe could be created from a state of nothingness which has no potentialities, no properties, no powers, and no possibilities. So when it comes to premise one of the Kalam, you questioned, did you question whether it's true that everything that begins to exist must have a cause? And is it your position that it is epistemically possible that universe could have come to exist uncaused out of nothing?
I don't know, and I didn't address that tonight.
Okay. Do you think it's epistemically possible that the universe came to exist uncaused out of nothing? And
I don't know, because so there are things that we cannot investigate. And so we can't get back beyond the Planck time. Math breaks down at that point. We can't. So the proposition, and one thing that you kind of raised was this notion that either it had to come out of nothing, and I think I've heard you before use the sort of nothing that rocks dream of as a reference to a quote from somebody else. That's not what physicists are proposing. My objection to Kalam is that the conclusion is, therefore, the universe had a cause for its existence. Why give the Kalam at all? Why not just put that as a premise in the argument that you're actually building? Because if I already accept that the universe had a cause for its existence, then that seems superfluous.
Okay, but didn't you just raise a criticism that would have been addressed by the Kalam?
Didn't I raise what
you just raised I think you just raised a concern that doesn't seem to be what physicists think, that there's this nothingness that came before the universe.
The Kalam doesn't address nothingness either.
No, but you just said, but this would have been addressed by the Kalam. Whatever begins to exist must have a cause for its existence.
The word nothing does not appear anywhere in
So
the Kalam.
are you willing to move beyond the Kalam and talk about the claims after the Kalam?
Of course.
Okay. So do you believe the universe had a beginning? I'll say that.
I have no idea. So here's the thing, really short.
Okay.
Our local presentation of the universe, the evidence points to some starting point that we cannot investigate and don't know anything about.
Yeah.
It may in fact be absurd to talk about things prior to the Big Bang if in fact time began with the Big Bang.
Sure.
I don't know. I'm not a cosmologist, and I don't know that we have sufficient understanding to actually say, yes, this is the case. As a matter of fact, I have a physicist friend who's working in an alternate model to that.
Okay.
So when you say, do you think the universe had a cause for its existence, I don't know.
Okay, but multiverse, universe, vacuum, all contiguous physical reality. My question is, do you believe, okay, so you either have the universe is past eternal or it's not. Is your answer just, I don't know?
Correct.
How could it possibly be that the universe could be infinite into the past?
I don't know. How could it possibly be that God is infinite in the past?
Well, we believe God is timeless.
It doesn't matter what you believe, it matters what you can
Well, no,
demonstrate.
definitionally, you asked how is it that God could be infinite in the past. I'm saying definitionally,
Well,
the Christian
defining
God
something
is
doesn't make
timeless.
it so.
Well, I know, but you asked me how could God exist infinitely
And
in
you
the
did
past.
not explain how God could exist. You just asserted that he does by definition.
You asked me definitionally something about the Christian God, and I gave you an answer. We believe he exists timelessly.
So
he doesn't exist infinitely, so I don't have that problem.
well, actually, you didn't give that answer till just now, but we're okay there. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, okay. So the problem with the past infinite seems to be, doesn't it, that if you crossed half of infinity, if time and events...
There's
in
no
the past,
such thing as, sorry.
if time and past events, well, just a series of events then.
Infinity isn't a quantity. It's unquantifiable. It's a concept that describes something that is
That there's no number for.
Right. So there's no such thing as half of infinity.
Right.
Similarly, there's no such thing as half of eternity.
I know,
So-
but aren't you describing the very problem that I'm raising? Is that when you posit that the universe has existed forever, however, whatever word you want to use for that, isn't it the case that if that's true, you would have this mathematical quandary where you would never arrive at today?
No, because if time began with the universe, then the universe has existed since time began.
Okay, so then it's not past eternal.
I never said it was past eternal.
You said you didn't know.
Correct. I don't know if why is this so difficult? I'm not a physicist. I don't think anybody knows. The difference between me and many apologists who also aren't physicists is that I'm not willing to pretend that I know just because I got stumped by a question and propose something that can be an answer to everything.
Why do you need to be a physicist in order to understand the philosophical point that the universe can't be past infinite because we would have never arrived at today?
Because a philosophical approximation is different from what actually happened at the origin of the universe.
All
I'm
right.
done.
5 minutes now, continuing with Matt leading the cross-examination.
Yeah, this is one of the frustrating things is that, I constantly, if I honestly don't know something, I say I don't know, and then people act as if it's absurd because they're convinced that they do have the right answer. So when we're talking about how one could demonstrate that God existed, there's the theological assertions, there's the philosophical arguments, but there's nothing that I'm aware of that could enter into a scientific investigation or even investigation of a courtroom. Am I right about that? Are we kind of stuck in the philosophical?
Well, there are those people in the intelligent design community who do deal with science and stuff like that. I'm not one of those guys. You'll notice I didn't bring a teleological argument tonight, a design argument. But I would say this, since you asked me, the thing about it is, I think that lots of other apologists have mentioned this to you, and I know you don't agree, but it seems like it seems like you want to use a method, like you prefer methodological naturalism.
No.
Is that not the case? Okay, well, clarify that.
I
and then I'll
prefer
answer.
methods that demonstrate that they lead to consistently reliable results.
Okay,
and
great.
the scientific processes do that. The theological processes don't.
Okay.
Faith doesn't. Faith is not a path to understanding. There's no position you couldn't justify based on faith. And I know you're not appealing to that.
Yeah.
I'm saying, what methodology can somebody demonstrate that we have a good understanding of its reliability that leads to the conclusion that any God, let alone the Christian God, exists?
Okay, I think those kind of, when you say, and I want to understand you properly, when you say that God needs to manifest in some detectable way, and I don't know if you said that tonight, but you've said it.
Sure, I've said it before.
Or God needs to, it sounds like what you're saying is that there needs to be something kind of, and I'm not saying science, but something kind of science-y that we can kind of test this thing. And
Sure.
here's the thing, here's my response to that. So I'll do it by analogy. Let's imagine that we have a metal detector, and that metal detector represents science or whatever you're proposing. And you were to say, man, this metal detector, every time there's metal, this metal detector chirps. It's like the best metal detector in the world. Therefore, we have no good reason to believe that sand and water and trees and air exist. That would be a problem. What you would do, in other words, is you would look for another device. And I think what you've got tonight is philosophy and history, and I think philosophy does reliably get us to answers. And I've given you philosophical arguments, but I haven't heard, and it's not that you haven't said things about them, you have, and I've enjoyed it, but I don't think you've said anything substantive to really deal with, especially the Kalam cosmological argument.
So,
Or the case that begins with the Kalam.
Oh, the substantive thing is that even if you concluded that the universe had must have an explanation for its existence, or must have a cause for its existence, what do you know about that cause and how do you know it? And when you or anybody else has presented the case, it is a list of assertions.
Well, can I answer? So if it's the cause of all nature coming into existence, then that would be, if nature is space, time, matter, then the cause would have to be, if nature can't come before nature to cause nature.
How do you know that?
Well, because it's nature that we're trying to explain.
Okay, how do you know it's not a different nature?
Well, it could be, but then you have, I said all contiguous physical reality. So what we would have is, you would still have to have a cause for that nature coming into existence. It would just mean you haven't gone back far enough.
Yeah.
So what I would say then is, the cause would have to be a spaceless, timeless, non-material cause.
What requires
And
that?
how is that an assertion?
So,
I'm sorry, it's your question.
the fact is, I'm fine with the notion that people intuitively reach the conclusion that whatever caused the universe is apart from the universe. But
Nature.
Sure, apart from our local presentation of the universe. Sagan used the word cosmos because universe is a terrible word when you're talking about multiverses. All of a sudden you've entered into a conflict. So the cosmos is everything there is or ever was, irrespective of time or anything else. So if the local presentation of the universe had to have some cause, then the only thing that I can know about that is that it seems to be the case that it couldn't have been our universe that caused itself. So there must be something else.
Yeah.
What that something else is or needs to be, I have no idea because I have no way to investigate it. I have no other universes to compare this to.
Well, you'll notice that in my opening statements, I specified that I'm talking about our local representation, multiverses, vacuum models, whatever you want to bring up, and it can't be past infinite for reasons that I'm happy to defend. And I know you say, well, I just don't think we can know. And I'm saying whatever comes before all of that we can call Sagan's cosmos, which is just a Greek word that means world, but
Sure.
Sagan's cosmos, all of that, whatever comes before, isn't that.
But I
And so
don't
it's-
see what's the case that it needs to be an agent.
Okay, can I answer that? We've got 4 seconds left, but it was a question. I'll go ahead and answer that. So there's a couple of reasons why it has to be an agent. First of all, an agent would have causal powers. Now that's not the end of the story.
Consistent, that's not necessity.
Okay, but that's not the end of the story. Also, you have types of causation, right? So event causation would be if I took this water bottle and threw it at the moderator and the microphone fell out of his hand. That's an event that caused another event, and I won't do that. But then there's state causation, which is like a frozen pond where you have a log resting on the top of that pond. This state is causing this other state. What you would have with the beginning of the universe is state-event causation. You would go from a state of timeless nothingness to an event, the beginning of the universe. The only thing that makes sense of that is agent causation.
Okay, that's just an assertion
Well,
that that's the only thing you can think of. When
It's not just that it's the only thing I can think of. And lastly,
Okay.
I'll say this: it would have to have libertarian free will. And the reason
Of course
it would is because there was no prior determinism to lead to that event. And what sorts of things have libertarian freedom? Agents do.